All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the MRS Ann Arbor District First Friday event entitled Torch 180, The Importance of Neurodiversity in the Workplace. This First Friday event is being presented by Callahan, founder and owner of Torch 180. My name is Shanti Bailey. I am the district manager for the Ann Arbor District, and thank you all once again for being here. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. Please exercise patience, especially with technology. We always want the best, but things happen, so just be patient. Zoom should default to a live transcript, but you can go to the live transcript button to either access or hide subtitles. There is also an option to view the full transcript. There is a designated time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. To ask a question in the Q&A, press the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom interface and enter your question. Captioning is available by pressing the closed caption button inside the Zoom application and choosing Show Subtitles. Without any further ado, I'd like to present our guest speaker. Rhonda Callahan is the founder and owner of Torch 180, located in Livingston County. Starting with the food truck in 2014, Rhonda has grown her dream of serving the community and working with individuals with disabilities. Since creating Torch 180, Rhonda has purchased the building and built a state-of-the-art commercial kitchen that provides delicious coffee and food, as well as trains individuals in culinary arts, increases their employability, and serves people in the community. In addition to continuing to grow Torch 180, Rhonda is also an adjunct professor at Cleary University teaching communications. And I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rhonda.
Thank you so much, Shanti. You can go to the first slide. Thank you. So actually go back one.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Rhonda Callahan, and I am the founder of actually two nonprofit organizations. My first nonprofit organization is called The Torch, and that was founded in actually 2012. And I had been homeless for a period of 9 months. And after that I had gone through that, I kept thinking, wow, I've never asked for help before, but the way I'm getting treated is like really diminishing my self-esteem and really making me feel so insignificant and like I can't contribute to society. And I started thinking about how I had never had an experience with poverty like that before. And I started realizing that people could get stuck that way. And I started thinking people are getting stuck because of that. And I wanted to do something where we could treat people who are living in need differently, giving them dignity. And so I started thinking about food. Once my life turned around and I had housing and I had a better job and was doing the things that I needed to do, I founded an organization called The Torch. I was homeless for 9 months, and during those 9 months, it's like a very dark, gray period of memories. But there were times when people did something that was so kind, so nice, so much that it impacted me that even now when I think about it, it's like this bright light shone. And so I wanted, whatever I did with the torch, I wanted it to be something that would shine a light into people's lives, something that they appreciated and enjoyed and that would mean something. So we were looking for a restaurant, never did find one, started talking about food trucks. And we decided that we would get a food truck, take it into neighborhoods where there were people in need and cook and serve free hot meals. Didn't know anything about food trucks, didn't know anything about how all of that would work, but we took the leap. And we launched actually in 2012, got our approval for our tax-exempt 501c3 in 2012. In 2013, we launched a website, we began The Torch, we began raising funds. By the end of 2013, we had a food truck in Livingston County. And so in 2014, in April of 2014 was the very first time we ever got our food truck out into neighborhoods. And the goal with our food truck is always to just to always be respectful, treating people with dignity, one of the things that I realized that was so difficult every time I needed to ask for help was I always had to, you have to produce your pay stubs, and somehow you have to prove you're homeless, being whatever it is, which a lot of times meant telling again and again and again what I was going through. And I didn't want people to feel like they had to do anything like that when they came to my food truck. And so we required no paperwork. Everybody who volunteers or helps has to learn people's names. We eat meals with all the people who we're giving food to, and we give them meals for free. While we were doing that, we were getting to know a lot of people. We started in one neighborhood. By the end of that first summer of taking our food truck out, we were in 3 different neighborhoods, and we were getting to know a lot of people. And as we sat and ate dinner with them and talked to people, I began to realize that a lot of those people living in those neighborhoods were people who had disabilities. And at that time, the good job that I had found that helped pull me out of poverty was I was working as an employment training specialist. I was working with people who had disabilities, specifically high school students, and I was working with them within the community and teaching them how you have a job. And of course, the biggest thing that we kept seeing was the soft skills that were lacking were what would cost them jobs. Either they didn't have enough self-esteem and ability to communicate with people that they weren't brave enough even to go get a job, or there were just other things that would happen. They might get a job and lose it, and get a job and lose it. And so we were trying to capture these young people while they were in high school and try to take care of those different types of issues. And so I was working with these high school students, and I'm in these neighborhoods at night, and I was talking to a couple one day, both had disabilities, and I asked them why they weren't working, because they were always complaining about not having jobs. And the wife said, well, she said, I've had a lot of jobs. They just always end. And I said, so what is happening that's causing them to end? And she said, excuse my French, this is exactly what she said. She said, every boss in Livingston County is an asshole. And I said, well, I don't think that that's the case, but I was thinking the common denominator was this woman didn't know how to communicate with people, and she didn't have the soft skills to hold a job. And so I started thinking, wow, is there a way that we could impact this disabled portion of this population of people living in poverty? And so I began to dream and to think. I was talking with MRS. I was talking with MCTI. I went over to Cleary's entrepreneurial division and said, I want to do something, I think some higher level training, because we didn't have anything that was really higher level training for people in Livingston County. And I was trying to pick what would be my area that I would train in. And the very brilliant entrepreneurial director said, well, food. By the time I got to this, it was 2015, and we had been taking the truck out, and I really knew, oftentimes we would feed 100 people in a row. I really did understand food and how to get it out the window and all the safety things and everything that went along with that. And so I started thinking, wow, what, food would be a good avenue. There's always jobs, and they're great, especially if you need a starter job or something to tide you over while maybe you want to try to shoot for something further down the road. And so we launched Torch 180 in 2015, got our 501c3 that summer. And then you can go ahead and switch to the slide, Shanti. We called it Torch 180 because I wanted to continue to be that beacon of hope, but also give people this opportunity to make a 180 with their lives, to turn it around. And so we offer food service and employability training being a lot of soft skills work. In fact, more of what we do than anything else is the soft skills work. We got our first class in 2016. MRS was willing to take a chance on us. They had 2 individuals who said they were interested in learning more about food service industry, and they came into our class. We were in a basement of a church. They had a commercial kitchen downstairs, and we taught there. It was very tricky because sometimes the people who went to church there, they decided they were going to do something in the kitchen, and it didn't matter if we had scheduled to be there. It didn't matter because they would kick us out. And so we were always like making fake kitchens in the classrooms and things like that. But those 2 students went through the program, and there's a quote there from Alex. He was one of our very first 2 students. And he said, one of the best things about this program is that you guys don't only focus on cooking, you focus on employability skills too. So he was a young man who had been in a lot of jobs. He had been losing them and trying and losing them. He really wanted to learn how to cook because he felt excited to be part of the food service industry. And so, and he actually is still employed today. The first place he worked closed down, and that was very devastating for him because he loved where he was, but he has continued to work ever since our program. The other person who was in our class continues to work as well. And so we borrowed that kitchen. Then we went down to, we went over to a school. We were invited to Howell High School, and we started teaching our employability skills and our kitchen training. We set up a sub shop for sandwiches, and they would sell those to staff. And they were in charge of making the whole thing run. It was interesting at Howell High School. The students who were in the program there happened to be in that class. So that was a large group of students that we trained that were not necessarily interested in food service. They were just happened to be, that was their class, and that's what that class did. And so they didn't get a choice. So it was an interesting group trying to draw them in and get them interested in food service as a potential future endeavor. And with that one, we really weren't looking for employability. We were helping Howell High School build this program that this teacher wanted to do. Then we went and taught over at the intermediate school district with the adult transitions program. And in that program, they had, I think there were 15 students. They had to interview to actually get into the program. So they had to express an active interest, interview, be willing to go get a job. And so we started working with that 18 to 26 population at the Pathway building. You can go to the next slide. So from 2015 until 2018, we taught 8 classes. We had 48 students, and 65% of them found employment afterwards. And the thing is, with the high school students, of which we had 2 large classes, those students were not required to get a job. So they didn't, some of them were not ready. So they really didn't find employment because we weren't working for that. We were just teaching them about that school. But as we're doing this and we're borrowing all these kitchens, and we're always working around the school schedules and around, the school holidays and how many days a week can you let us come in, we kept thinking, man, we need our own building. We need our own space. And so we started searching with a realtor who's a saint. We started searching with her and looked at so many buildings to do training in. We couldn't find one. Finally, in 2018, she actually called me and said, hey, the former Fowlerville Library is for sale. And she said, do you want to take a look at it? It might have potential for what we're looking for. And my initial reaction was, oh my gosh, a library. You can flip the slide, Shanti. So my initial reaction was a library, and I was like, libraries look like institutions, and I passionately did not want an institution. And so when we looked at it though, we had been looking for a 2,000 square foot building with a 1,000 square foot kitchen, a 500 square foot dining room, a 500 square foot classroom. This building happened to be 4,000 square feet. And so we ended up being able to, we purchased it with cash, and then we were able to do, we've got our huge training kitchen. We also have a large dining room, a large classroom, and a coffee shop inside as well. And so we were able to also offer barista training. I was convinced after all the time we had spent doing all that other training in everybody else's building, it never was for real. It was always, we were pretending to have a restaurant, or, when we did the sub shop, that wasn't really, we had no control over that. They were kind of collecting money, but we weren't using cash registers and things like that. And I was always convinced that it's the application of the soft skills and the hard skills that you learn that really cement them with you. And I wanted an opportunity for students to actually have real customers, genuine customers who maybe weren't always going to be nice, and a genuine opportunity to try things and to make mistakes in a safe place where they're not going to get fired, but where we can then begin to address the different things like not calling in when you're not going to come, not bothering to find a replacement, coming in late and not worrying about that, thinking you're kind of entitled to a job. And then sometimes just some of the basic things, how to use transportation, how to communicate, what's appropriate communication, how do you know if someone is flirting or not flirting, what's appropriate and things like that. And so all those different things, I wanted to be in a real situation, because in a real kitchen, it moves fast, it moves loud, it gets hot, and you really have to be on or you at least have to have strategies to help yourself get through those moments till you can get to the other side, and then maybe, you know, try to go have a cool down. So we purchased the building. I told our architect who was volunteering his time with us, I said, I think that because we are in Fowlerville, I think that we need to have a destination. We need to have a place that people who are going to be customers, they're going to be willing to drive a little bit if they have to. Fowlerville has been fantastic. We are a very favorite lunch place right now and everything, but I wanted us to be at that type of a destination. And so you can turn the slide. And
This is
so
the
our build
interpreter
out and
speaking.
renovation.
Can we slow it down a little bit? Thank you. Just to be mindful that there are interpreters working. Thank you.
Okay. So in our building, we now have, as you can see, our coffee bar, our dining room, the front of the building, very inviting. The students, when they come in, they're always saying that they are very grateful and they feel like they're coming home. And that was what I wanted. And then when our customers come in, they feel the same way. The students run the whole thing. They run the coffee bar, they cook the food, they do the serving, and they work on every aspect of being part of a food service. You can flip the slides. So we actually got our certificate of occupancy in February of 2020, which wasn't great for us. We started our first class with 9 students, all from the intermediate school district. We started them on the 23rd of February, and then 3 weeks later, we got shut down from COVID and flipped back and actually started doing our torch stuff during the day, where we were serving food to a very hungry and scared community. So we did that until we got students back again. In spite of it, I mean, we lost students throughout COVID. Some of them never were able to come back. But then we did gain a few students a couple different times through the year. We were able to get many of them through their food safety certifications. We did get open a little bit later into their programs than we wanted to, but we were able to do a lot of soft skills practice with them. We did the food prep, the dishwashing, the cleaning and sanitizing. We started working on cash register and money skills in customer service. So I wanted to be able, when they left, to give kind of a comprehensive idea of what they really could do. And we try really hard to put them in areas where they seem like it fits really well, and they're learning and they're able to grasp it, and they also enjoy what they're doing. So not everybody is a cash register order taker type of a person, and not everybody's a baker, and not everybody can do some of the things. I try to always encourage them, you're going to do more than dishwashing. But to be honest, I've had a few that's all they wanted. And so as much as I could get them to go do other things, they always gravitated back to the dish area. So, but we got those classes through, and then you can turn the slide, Shanti. So currently what we've got going on, we've got 3 levels of programs. They do approximately 300 hours per program. This is based on the Michigan Career and Technical Institute's culinary program. I work very closely with them. We are accredited through them. Sometimes students need more than the 300 hours, and so we stretch it as long as we think they need. We do intensive soft skills, and so we do have classroom work, we do have some book work we do, but then we always have ongoing lists with the students of what types of soft skill things they need to be looking out for, and I always try to get them to figure out what will help them to be able to correct those, rather than me just throwing a bunch of suggestions out there. A lot of times they kind of know what might help. And so then we talk about how to make those accommodations for them so that they're reasonable when they go to a job, that they're not, asking, if we get busy, I'm going to leave the kitchen or something like that, because that leaves everybody else with your job. And so we figure out different ways to get around those things and help them so that they'll be successful when they go. The first level students earn the Serve Safe Food Handler certification. The second levels earn their food allergens, and the third level is the food manager certification. We also have a couple of other different things that we can do with them. So if they're sometimes at the first level, they're ready to exit the program. And so every time they're getting near an exit point, we work with them to start looking for a job that will fit their needs and hopefully close to their home. I never wanted to be just the place that just hires everybody, because I think that inclusivity is really important to me. And so I think I know they can work in these other businesses and be inclusive and included. And so I work really hard at trying to talk to employers about including our young people and talking to them about ways that we can help them. And so the goal is for them to get employed somewhere outside of our organization, although we have employed a few of them in our organization. They could Torch 180 entrepreneur training. I had a student who was interested in this. This is a training that is grant funded, and it would also needs heavy parental involvement. So not every student that's a good fit for, but they ended up moving. And so we never have seen one of those programs go through. We do the barista skills training. We are actually, we hadn't totally focused on that, but now there's some talk about potentially turning that maybe into a segment of an apprenticeship. So we're looking at that. And then we have the apprenticeships that have been registered with the Department of Labor. You have to be a third level student to get into the apprenticeship. And we have to have agreement between us that I think you're a good fit, you think you're a good fit, and they understand the full commitment, because it can take up to 2 years to get through that program. It's a paid program, but they get a lot of higher level training in terms of learning more management, far more advanced soft skills training. The goal is typically to try to get students through 2 levels. That's where I would like to see them go, because then I feel like they really are ready and have a grasp on working. You can turn the slide. So the inclusive workplace, we always talk about, like, what is it that we can say, that we can tell employers, these are the types of things that they can bring into your workplace. Well, I know one thing is the creativity in terms of solving problems. In our kitchen, a couple of things we have done. One, learning time management is really tricky. And so we finally put a time management, a 4-quadrant chart up on our freezer. And in the first quadrant is the jobs that need to be done that day that are important and urgent and need to be done first. And then in the next one are important jobs, but they don't necessarily need to be done. They're going to be secondary. And then we have the jobs that are less important, less urgent, but if you're out of things to do, then start working on that list. And then the very last one is typically things like chat on your phone with your family and things like that. That's the not important, not urgent, don't really use your work time for it. We were trying to teach these prioritization tools to the students, and we were trying to just make lists of what needed to be done in the order of importance. But when we put that chart up there, it not only helped the students, it has helped every neurotypical volunteer who comes in there, every neurotypical employee that we hire. The whole entire kitchen has benefited from that. It has run so much smoother. That's not something we would have done had we not had these individuals that really could benefit from it. The other thing that we do is we have put all of our recipes, because we make everything from scratch, or the students do. All the recipes are enclosed in plastic sleeves. And so the students you go down the list, and you gather all of your materials, then you measure everything out. And as you do these, you mark in the area what you've done. And we did that because helping students learn to track lists was really important. But the benefit that we have seen, now everybody in the kitchen does it, is because we're all busy and we all get called away from our station. If you've done it correctly, anyone can walk over and see where you're at and step in and finish it, so that we can work as a team and help each other. That's not something we would have necessarily even thought of before, as in terms of working for everybody, but it's a creative and it's a great solution. I worked with a restaurant once. They wanted certain fruits and vegetables cut certain ways. And then they said, what if they don't know these vegetables? We did pictures. So we made a nice display of pictures up over their cutting area. And so you know what a tomato is. And well, what they found out was their neurotypical individuals who were coming in there were also very helped by that, because they could just quickly look up there, quickly see if it needs to be a dice or a slice or whatever. So there are a lot of different things that actually can benefit the whole workplace when you start thinking about just helping to accommodate some of these individuals. Also seeing the world through the eyes of people who have disabilities. I think that in terms of that, I think that opens up empathy. It opens up compassion. And I've had so many employers tell me that they just hadn't really thought about some of the obstacles that these guys face. And, sometimes you can be very dismissive especially if you're talking to somebody who has autism and you think that they just don't like you or because of their facial expressions or whatever. And then you begin to learn that you can look past that and you can find these human beings, but you've got to get to that point where you can do that and where your employees will do that. My students take a lot of pride in their work. Everywhere they go, they will come back and they will say, this is what I'm doing. They're proud of their workplaces. I've had very few who ended up unhappy. Almost all of them will stay as long as they can. They will do a great job. That's not just a stereotype. That literally is what happens because they're embracing the work that they're doing. Now, of course, we're training people who are interested in working with food, how to work with food. And so that helps because it's a huge interest area for them. They have a lot of resilience. I've seen some that have gone through multiple managers at their work, and sometimes they don't understand why a manager doesn't like them, but they just stay and they continue to be a great employee. And so, I think that comes from a lifetime of having those challenges that they've faced and then having to bounce back from it. And so you get people who aren't going to flee at the slightest discomfort. That has been probably 90% of my students. And they're also the most accepting. They know how it feels to be bullied. They understand that. And so they welcome all different kinds of people. And so I love it when we have our restaurant full and we might have a spectrum of all kinds of people who are in the dining room, and our students will walk through and they'll talk to everybody and they don't care. And whenever somebody new comes to either to join our program or to volunteer in our program or do something like that, they are so welcomed into our kitchen. And I think that people could learn from that. We all need to learn to calm down a little bit. It's okay if things are a little bit slow because now you've got this new individual, somebody new that you can get to know and you can enjoy their personality. Let's see, you can go ahead and change. So I talked to my students. I talked to one student who hasn't got a job yet. She's looking forward to it. She's really working hard on her soft skills to get herself there. Her hard skills, she learns very easily. She knows her soft skills are where she needs to focus. And she said, learning how to communicate more with the staff will help me at work. So she's already thinking about when she goes to a job, how important it's going to be for her to be able to communicate with everybody and to communicate in an appropriate way, which is sometimes a challenge. She tends to talk super fast and not stop. And so we've just been practicing and practicing, and she's seeing the benefits and she's saying, this is what's going to help me as I move forward. And then one of my apprentices has had a job for the past 2 years. And I asked him what he felt like was his superpower. What has he brought to his company? And he said, at my job, I've been able to teach other people about food safety. Most of them don't have any idea about it. So the interesting thing about that for me was because they are in this training program that a lot of people don't take. And we are very strict. They don't get out of the classroom. When I do take them in the kitchen, and I'm saying they don't get out of the classroom to roam free in the kitchen until I consistently see food safety habits forming. So I have to consistently see them walking through the doors and going straight to the hand washing sink. Consistently see them appropriately when we're practicing knife skills. They're holding their knives correctly. I have to consistently see that they know how to be safe and that they know when to wash their hands and they know when to clean and sanitize and how to be careful with time and temperature and all the different things that go into keeping food safe and keeping a kitchen safe and keeping your coworkers safe and your customers. So these guys are getting this intensive training, and a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people will get hired into a job and they really don't know. They're just kind of feeling their way. And so Sean has all this knowledge and he loves it when they will ask him, they'll say, what are you going to do to do this? What would you do? Do you need gloves for that? And he's able to tell them, and it's built his self-esteem a lot. And the management appreciates it, that he has that knowledge. And then Vic shared part of my disability is ADHD. And a lot of times when everyone else is starting to fall in their faces, I'm still able to work fast and get a lot done. They always ask me where I get all my energy. And I think that, and I see that as very true. Vic is actually working for us full time right now. And as the day goes on, everybody does start getting tired, and he is just full on, still going, getting the work done, encouraging everybody to get there, to keep going on only another hour, only another half hour, only another 15 minutes. And that's a huge thing. And you know, and he's said he believes that that's because he has ADHD, and he's bringing that to his companies to make them better. And I have had employers tell me that they've appreciated that about him as well. So I've thought so much about what it is that makes individuals who have disabilities become such great employees, and how can I tell people that? And I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath. And in that book, it's all about people who would be perceived as underdogs, or who literally are underdogs, and how they end up being successful. And in one of the chapters, I always read to my students, and he's talking to Sam, I think Gary Cohn. He's a man who had dyslexia through school, and all through school, he couldn't read. And so he would struggle, and he didn't want people to think he was stupid. So he became the class clown. He found all these different ways to accommodate himself to not really stand out as the guy who couldn't read. And so he went to college and barely got through college, but one of his internships, he spent a little bit of time at a local brokerage, and he was interested in that, but it wasn't something that he could really train for. So he went and got another kind of a manual job, but he just kept thinking back to, I really want to do this investment stuff. And so he went over to the World Trade Center, and he thought he was just going to walk in and tell them, look, I did this brokerage stuff, I really want a job, and he was going to get a job. He just felt that that was going to happen. Well, when he got to the World Trade Center, nobody would let him in, because he had no qualifications. He had nothing, no reason really to be there, other than he just decided he was going to get this job. So he's there at the end of the day, and a well-dressed man comes rushing out of the building, and he hears him say, I'm late, I've got to get to LaGuardia. And so he walked up to him and said, hey, could we share a cab? I'm going to LaGuardia too. And the guy said, sure. So after they got into the cab, he starts talking to the guy about his job. And he realized that he was an options trader, but he didn't really understand options. And so Gary basically said, I can do anything. I understand it. I can do any of it. Give me a chance. So the guy, by the end of the time, said, I'm going to give you your phone. I'm going to give you my phone number. We'll talk. You can come in on Monday. So Gary shares that he went home and he spent the entire weekend reading a 22-page book that was all about options trading. He didn't know anything about it. He said he would pore over one word at a time because he was trying to understand it. But by the end of this whole weekend of study, he understood options trading. So he showed up at work and he stood behind the boss and told him, you know, sell this, buy that, sell this, buy that. And by the end of the day, the guy was like, you're on, because he started making him a lot of money. So Malcolm Gladwell talked to him about, like, why do you think you were able to do that? And, you know, he said that part of it was his whole life he had been forced to pretend. He had to pretend he was this class clown. He had to pretend he could read. So it wasn't a big deal to him to pretend he could be an options trader, because his disability had caused him to just practice and practice that. And so he felt like he was already comfortable, and he was going to have to be somebody different than who he was, which was helpful in getting this job. But then he talks about also, like, who hasn't experienced the kinds of things he had, who'd have the courage to jump into the cab in the first place. And he said the reason for him, he felt like he was used to failure. He was used to it. And so what's the worst thing that can happen? Failure. And I've failed so many times. What's the worst that can happen? And then he gave this other comment. Will you turn it, please, Shanti? He says,
Again, just a friendly reminder, you are working with interpreters. Thank you.
he said, my upbringing allowed me to be comfortable with failure. The one trait in a lot of dyslexic people I know is that by the time we got out of college, our ability to deal with failure was very highly developed. And so we look at most situations and see much more of the upside than the downside. Because we're so accustomed to the downside, it doesn't faze us. I've thought about it many times. I really have, because it defined who I am. I wouldn't be where I am today without my dyslexia. I never would have taken that first chance. And I think that so many times I do see this, even when my students come in at the beginning and they don't seem to have any self-esteem, they come. They come and they bring, I've always failed in school. It's never been good for me. I just have been humiliated and being around all the other students who could do everything, and I didn't have friends. And so they'll come in with all of that, and yet they come and try one more thing. And some of them have lost multiple jobs and they're feeling like this is kind of my last resort, but they do it. They have that resiliency. And I'm always trying to point that out to them, that that is a superpower for them, because they'll stick it out. And I think that also contributes to why when they get jobs, they're not leaving, they're staying, because they're going to stick it out. They'll stick it out through the managers. They'll stick it out through changes. They'll stick it out when they're challenged to do some training. I've had many students come back over to Torch 180 to have us help them get through some online training. So instead of thinking, oh my gosh, online training, I'm done, they will think, where are my resources? And so I think that, this is a huge testimonial for people to hopefully open their doors and be willing to maybe look at, maybe the way we always do things isn't the only way to do things. Maybe we can start looking at some different ways that could potentially make things better for everybody and include people who have a lot to bring. I have had almost zero students who couldn't learn the hard skills. We are always able. Some of them, when I tell their parents that they handle knives and they do all the chopping and dicing for us, some of them, their parents are like, oh my gosh. But I'm like, try them. If you know how to handle a knife safely, you won't get cut. It's by not knowing and guessing and trying to figure it out, or watching other people who don't know. That's what happens. And so the hard skills are there. So a lot of times it's as we're just looking at the ways we can help to accommodate a lot of the soft skills, or even make it equitable for them in terms of the hard skills. So they're still doing what everyone else is doing, but they're using their reasonable accommodations. You can switch the slides. So Independence Village of Brighton, we have been working with them for a while. They love our students and they're always sending me questions about, do you have anybody who can do this or that? They gave us this quote: Torch 180 helped shine a light on candidates who had the skill and the heart to provide the absolute best experience for the seniors in our community. That was a huge testimonial for us, because sometimes we do get in and help the students again, former students again, if they're having an area where they need some extra support, but Independence Village loves to have them. And then a coworker of Sean's came in one day and she said, I love working with Sean. He's such a great guy. She never would have had a reason to meet him if it hadn't been, he went through our program, got the courage to go ahead and go get the job. And now she's talks to him like everybody else, instead of like he's somebody special or with special problems. She just talks to him. He's just a friend. And so that's when it's working perfectly. So that's what I got for you today.
All right, thank you so much, Rhonda. I'm going to go into the question and answers and see what we have in there. Okay, so the first question is Torch 180 a nonprofit, and is it funded by the United Way?
So Torch 180 is a tax-exempt 50C1 nonprofit organization. We have not been funded directly by the United Way. Their grants have not typically been for anything that we're necessarily doing. Occasionally people will sign up to donate to us through the United Way, and then we will get donations that way, and when they do their yearly campaign.
Okay. So Rhonda, one of the things you highlighted was the resilience of individuals who are neurodiverse. They're loyal, they're willing to work through things, and they're able to problem solve. And that's a whole lot of positives. In working in the community, I know one of the things that inspired you was the young lady who said all of the employers in Livingston were assholes. So how did you bridge that gap between some of the negative stereotypes people have with working with neurodiverse people and being able to get them hired all throughout Livingston County? What tips would you give professionals in working with employers and encouraging them to hire neurodiverse people?
Well, I think one of the things I think that has really helped is being able to offer the higher level training. So they're coming in with skill sets that some of the others don't have. And then, so when I approach an employer, often we have the advantage of having Torch 180. Almost 100% of them I've said, come on over and have lunch. They'll come over and they'll have lunch and they see our students in action and they're like, these guys can do it. But I do spend time talking to them about some of the neurodivergent characteristics they might see, and education. You know, it's a lot of education, and how let's not jump to conclusions and think the worst about someone. First, let's think, is this something that maybe has something to do with their challenges in their disability? I know I have, I tell people all the time, you know, we're training. You're not going to punish these neurodivergent people and get them to act like people who don't have any challenges. So being angry and that doesn't help. I had a student come in one time, and of course, throughout the organization, there's all other employees who are working with them as well. And they said, oh, I'm just so mad. I hate this person. I'm going to beat them up. We're going to get in a fight. And I said, well, what is it? It's this one manager. They keep telling me I don't know how to clean pizza pans. I know how to do dishes. And it's true. This is a very intelligent person, did know how to do dishes. So we went in the dish room and I said, show me what you're doing. Because if this is consistently happening, maybe it is something that you're doing. And when I gave them one of our big cookie sheets. They grabbed it, they scrubbed the top, they sprayed it down, and they put it in the dishwasher. And I said, there it is. Turn it over and scrub the back too, because I bet pizza pans, which we don't do pizza, but I bet they're greasy on the back. And it fixed the problem. And I said, now go back and say, I understand now what I was doing wrong, because they just kept saying you need to do it better. And he didn't get that. And so that's sometimes I'll say, you know, call us or try to talk it through and make sure that the person understands. The woman in the neighborhood, she truly didn't understand why she was getting fired. She really didn't get it. And so helping, you know, them to begin to see those things and trying to educate employers, you know, this can happen. And, you know, sometimes we have students who have gotten so used to using it as a crutch. You know, well, I'm not going to stay in the kitchen when it gets hot. I'm not going to stay in the kitchen. And then, you know, we try to really work on those things with them. And sometimes that will appear again once they leave. And I tell employers, feel comfortable giving them your expectations, you know, because if you start out and you're kind of cutting a lot of corners, my students are smart. Everybody would like to work easier and get the same money. So, and they're like, oh, I can go sit and don't have to be in there when it's busy. I'll just do that. And everyone's just going to accept it. But then it starts to make other people resent them, and you start to have those different conflicts. And so it's a lot of education. And that's something that I've been really passionate about, is meeting face-to-face with potential new employers. I've got a couple more coming in next week, because I'm always trying to grow our spread so that, you know, transportation's challenging. I do try to make people aware of that as well. I get it that, you know, sometimes, especially the ones who don't drive, which is probably 98% of who we train, our transportation system is iffy. And so, you know, but I also try to teach the students, you know, if they're telling you they're not going to get you there at 11, then maybe you have to have them get you there at 9:30 or 10. Not always the ideal thing, but you got to weigh between being late or finding something to do for that hour. It's not fun. It's challenging, So just, I think does come with a lot of education and a lot of one-on-one discussions.
Thank you. So we have 2 questions. Rhonda, can you talk more about the apprenticeships happening currently and how you're planning for the barista apprenticeships?
Okay, so basically, the apprenticeships, those are grant funded through MCTI. They had approached me actually in 2020. There were beginning to be these talks about potential apprenticeships, and of course, at that time, everything was falling apart. I didn't even know if we were still going to have an organization. You know, by the time 2020 got done, kind of got tabled. But during that time, I had some students that were kind of excelling. And so then it came up again later in 2021, do you still have students who potentially could be part of this apprenticeship? And then they said, oh, but there's no culinary apprenticeship. Can you write one? And so then I was like, well, send me everything that you've got and then I will look at it. The thing I like about the apprenticeships is that when you say that you're going to do one with your company, you can go through, like there was literally, they probably sent me, I don't know, 35 pages of requirements for culinary. But as I went through it, there's a few things we don't do on purpose at Torch 180. We don't do any seafood. The health department is so hard on that. And it's just, we're working hard just to train on these basic skill sets. And so we just haven't done seafood. So whenever I took everything out that was seafood, they said, you can remove anything you don't do. And I really customized it to what we were doing, but then also to what I was hearing employers say, because I knew we're trying to build our program very much that this is what people are saying they need. So this is what we need to turn out. Why I talk about knife skills so much, because so many people have told me they need people who can handle a knife correctly and well. And the thing with that's almost 100% muscle memory. And so the more you do it, the faster you get, the better you get, the more you learn. And so we do a ton of stuff that requires cutting. Like, well, look at a recipe. There's no cutting in that one. Let's try a different one. And so things like that. So the apprenticeships are based really on what you're doing. So these 3 students, they had completed level 1 and level 2, and they all 3 agreed that they wanted to try this apprenticeship program. So there are several different classes that they take throughout it. Management courses, there's supervision, there's a lot of getting along with your peers, there's some heavy duty soft skills in there, and some higher level kitchen cooking concepts that we don't really, even in Livingston County, I'm not sure that they are going to apply too much in Livingston County just because we don't have those super high-end restaurants. But so these 3 guys started, we officially, I think they signed in July 1st of 2022. And then they're getting pretty close to being finished. So we're almost done with the last 2 classes, and they're getting their hours fulfilled. They have to work a certain number of hours. It's a paid apprenticeship. And so they have to work a certain number of hours and they have to be doing all these different things. So right now they're working on price costing our appetizer menu, because it gives them the idea of this is what we base our prices on, but they have to first figure out all the ingredients and how much we use and all of that. And so it's a lot more technical thinking in terms of that. And then we kind of turn the kitchen over to them most of the time. If you're here, I expect you're going to be picking up the slack and doing, although we do have other kitchen managers available and instructors. So they have completed that. It can be a 2-year, but it's very much competency based. And so they advance as they gain competency. And these 3, I think they've actually been a really great group because they've kind of all been ready at the same time to get to the next level. But you have to be prepared if you have some disparities. You can't push them through too fast because then they don't learn. And so, it's competency based. So I think it's every quarter, I get sent a thing reminding me to put in what competencies have they reached. So I enter all that data in, and then we see where they're going. We talk about where they're headed. And many of them are soft skills that they're still working on. They've got a lot of the hard skills down. Many of them, they're still trying to get those soft skill competencies, those higher levels. Now the barista, that was tossed out there. I think once we were like, well, we developed a culinary, Would you ever consider barista? And we haven't had a lot of students who have really been interested in doing the barista. But we also had a big drop off in students after, after COVID and everything. So we've been kind of rebuilding everything. Right now, I do have like 3 who are quite interested in doing barista. We started the conversation again because one of them asked, is there an apprenticeship for barista? And I was like, never heard of that. I started talking about it. So basically it's in the conversation. And it will be, once again, we looked through all approved apprenticeships to see if there was anywhere in there was one for a coffee barista. We haven't found one, but we did find a bartender one that is like mixed drinks. So I am now looking at that and comparing it to our barista curriculum and seeing, could we redevelop that? Because a lot of it, again, a lot of it is soft skills. A lot of that's going to be the same. It's customer service. But then in terms of, instead of doing these alcohol drinks, doing these coffee drinks, can we like substitute those in there and develop something that would give, and largely what I like it for is, we spend so much time trying to help students undo a lot of behaviors they've done their whole life. You can't do it in a couple of weeks. You can't do it in a month. It has to happen again and again and again 1,000 times until all of a sudden, maybe someone who hasn't been in a while comes in and goes, oh my gosh, they're so improved. And a lot of times the people who knew us in 2020, in fact, someone just came in today and she hadn't been in since like early 2021. And she was amazed because some of the students, I've hired a couple of them and she was just like, wow, they've come so far, and you don't always see it when you're right in the middle of it. So, but it takes time. And what I like with those is that I'm allowed to have the time to help them get those competencies if they can. And of course, if you get into it and it's like, I don't think this isn't really going to turn into a good fit, you can exit them if you need to, and help them. But I always make sure they have a job to go to. I start reaching out to my connections just because I don't want to leave them out there hanging. And now they've done this great training and then they lose it if they don't get to, or they start losing their self-esteem again if it takes a long time to find a job.
Got it. And I think we have time for one more question. What soft skill strategies have you found to work best for those that are neurodivergent in preparing for a job interview or in communicating with the potential employer prior to the interview?
So we do a lot of role play, which I'm sure you've probably employed that quite a bit. Sometimes I will have bosses from different places come in and conduct interviews. And sometimes they find someone they like and that this seems like a good fit. But mostly I really believe the more we put these young people in the situation where that pressure is on them, the more we can observe and go, okay, look, this is what's happening. What's scaring you? Or why are you feeling like to answer that way? We do script a lot of answers and we do talk a lot about different types of questions that might be asked. And we also talk about them in different ways because, we will ask the same question 20 different ways if we can, just because you don't know what version you're going to hear, but grab these words. That's where that's going. Most of the time, especially with our students that we're working with, the employers know me and they know, that we're working through things and that nerves might make a bad impression, but this is a person that's going to be valuable for your company. And so they're willing to kind of work through some of that stuff with the students as well. But I think that the more we can get them to practice it and practice it and practice it, and it's even better if we're watching, because then we can pick up on like, okay, I felt uncomfortable when you said that, and I know you really well, and so then like what would be a different way to say it? Or maybe they're not always good at articulating, or their mind goes blank. And so I always have them bring a note sheet with them so that they can look down at that and just look and have not long sentences so they'll read, but just a bullet to get them going again. And so, but we practice and practice and practice to try to get them ready.
All right. Well, Rhonda, we are approaching the end of our hour. I really just want to say thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. You have done amazing work in Livingston County. You've done amazing work with MRS. We are so happy to have you as a partner.
Thank you.
I know that you're gearing up to have your first class as a MCTI satellite site in July of this year. So if you
We
MRS
actually launched the first one in January, but then we're looking for a big growth in July. Because there's
Yeah.
only 2 students in the one we launched in January, which is good because it's been great in terms of working out all the kinks. So yes.
Yes, so MRS staff, especially my district, please, if you have somebody who's interested in culinary arts and if they're able to, they have transportation, please consider getting them signed up or in contact with Rhonda so we can give her a good class in July. Again, thank you for everything that you do in the community. Thank you on behalf of MRS, and really thank you for taking time out today to talk to us. I hope that everyone learned something today about working with neurodivergent persons and better ways to interact with employers when we're talking about hiring our customers. So Rhonda, thank you for your time. We really appreciate you being here. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, okay?
Thank you, you too.
All right.
Thanks for
thank
having
you.
me.